The night sky over the Scottish Highlands was choked in mist and silence, until a piercing roar cut through the dark. A sleek private jet, polished silver, twin engines humming like thunder held on a leash, broke through the clouds and touched down on a rain-slicked tarmac at Inverness Dallcross Airport. Midnight. No press. No lights. No crowd. Only the blinking red signal lights along the runway and the faint silhouette of a waiting black Jaguar salooned beneath the sodium fog lamps. The jet's engine whined into a decrescendo, then stopped. The world fell quiet again, save for the patter of light rain against metal. The door of the jet hissed open. Out stepped a figure dressed in black. A long wool coat fluttered slightly in the wind. He wore no stage makeup, no glitter, no spotlight, only dark glasses, a scarf, and the weariness of someone carrying too many secrets. Freddie Mercury. He paused at the top of the stairs, scanning the empty airstrip. No photographers, no reporters, just the cold Highland air nipping at his cheeks and the distant call of a gull. He exhaled, slowly. The kind of breath you take when you're about to do something that costs more than money. The driver stood at attention beside the car, unsure whether to speak. Freddie walked down the steps, his black boots clicking softly on the metal. As he reached the car, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a folded photograph, worn at the corners. The image, a teenage girl, maybe 17, thin but beaming with a Queen t-shirt stretched proudly across her chest. Her hospital wristband was visible, peeking out from beneath her sleeve. The photo had been taken in a sterile-looking hospital room, but the girl's eyes were full of color and light. Scrawled in careful handwriting beneath the photo, "You kept me alive, Freddie. Love, Lucy." He tucked the picture away. Then, without looking up, he spoke to the driver. "Take me to her," he said softly. The car pulled away, tires whispering against the wet pavement. The world outside the window was a blur of fog, fence posts, and mist-shrouded hills. Freddie leaned against the window, his face unreadable. No one in the band knew where he'd gone. He'd told his manager he was taking a break. That was 3 hours ago. As the road snaked to the countryside, Freddie opened the glove box and placed a photo carefully inside. Beside it, a cassette tape label for Lucy, Freddie Live Mix Acoustic. Next to the tape, a small velvet box. He didn't open it, just rested his fingers on top, as if to remind himself it was real. It had all started with letters. Hundreds of them, some from fans asking for autographs, others begging for backstage passes. But Lucy's letters were different. They didn't ask for anything. They simply told stories. About being sick, about music, about how her father walked out, and how somebody to love got her through that night, about how she played Bohemian Rhapsody on a cheap keyboard with plastic keys that stuck, about how she wished, just once, she could be there in the crowd, even just the nosebleeds, to see Queen live before she died. He'd read every single one. Never wrote back, but he read them, quietly, in hotel rooms, in dressing rooms, before shows. One letter haunted him more than the rest. Dated 3 weeks ago. "They say I won't make it to Christmas. I'm not scared of dying, really. I'm scared of missing things. Your next tour, the next album. You once said music is the closest thing we have to magic. Well, thank you for making mine magical. Just knowing you exist helped me get through the worst pain. If nothing else, just know I loved every note." He had been staring at that letter when he made the decision. The car slowed as it turned onto a gravel road. A sign read, "St. Clair Hospice, Visitors Welcome." Freddie sat up. He adjusted his scarf and rubbed his hands together, as if bracing for a storm no one else could see. The driver stopped at the gate. Rain tapped the windshield like a ticking clock. "Shall I wait, sir?" Freddie didn't answer at first. Then, "No." He reached into the glove box, took the tape, the photo, and the velvet box, then added something from his coat, a signed tour poster, folded carefully and sealed in plastic. He looked at the driver one last time. "Tell no one." And with that, he stepped into the rain. Inside the hospice, the world was quiet. Soft yellow lighting. The faint smell of chamomile and antiseptic. A nurse at the reception desk looked up, startled. Her eyes went wide. "I are?" Freddie held a finger to his lips. "I'm here for Lucy Walker," he said. "I'm a friend." 10 minutes later, Freddie stood outside room 9. From within, he could hear the steady beep of heart monitors and the soft hum of a bedside radio, playing Love of My Life on low volume. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering himself. Then he knocked. A nurse peeked out. Her eyes welled up instantly when she saw him. She nodded silently. Stepping aside, Freddie Mercury entered the room. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The door to room 9 creaked softly as Freddie stepped inside. It was a small, quiet space, clean but lived in. A collection of handmade get-well cards lined the windowsill. Some were from classmates, others clearly drawn by children. Bright crayon rainbows, stars, a wobbly queen logo in red and gold. Someone had strung up fairy lights across the ceiling. They twinkled faintly, like tiny stars scattered across a midnight sky. And in the center of it all was Lucy. She was asleep, propped gently against pillows. Her breathing was shallow, her lips pale. An oxygen tube framed her delicate face, and her head, once full of curly chestnut hair, now bore only wisps under a lavender headscarf. But she still wore her queen's shirt, the faded logo stretched thin over a too small frame. At her side sat a battered composition notebook and a Walkman with worn-out headphones. Freddie didn't speak. Not yet. He just stood there, taking in the sight. He wasn't a stranger to sickness. Not anymore. But this was different. This was someone who had loved him from a distance, without ever asking for anything back. No backstage pass. No selfie. No signature. Just music. That was all she'd wanted. And now, here she was, the girl behind the letters. 1 year earlier, Freddie had just come off stage at Wembley. The show had been electric. 70,000 fans roaring his name, their voices thunderous under the night sky. Sweat still dripped down his neck as he collapsed into the green room couch, adrenaline still humming in his blood. "Freddie," one of the assistants called. "Fan mail." He waved them off. "Later." But something about the top envelope made him stop. It was pale purple, with tiny music notes drawn around the edges. It smelled faintly of lavender. He opened it absent-mindedly. "Dear Freddie, my name is Lucy Walker. I'm 16, and I live in Inverness, Scotland. I don't expect you to read this, but I'm writing anyway because your music gives me something I can't really explain." He kept reading. "I was diagnosed with a rare cancer last year. They say I won't make it to my 18th birthday. Sometimes I pretend that doesn't scare me, but it does. What helps is your music. You make me feel like I'm not dying. You make me feel alive." Freddie swallowed hard. There was no melodrama in her words. Just honesty. Raw, young, beautiful honesty. "Somebody to Love" is my favorite. I don't know why. Maybe because sometimes I feel like nobody sees me. But when I hear that song, it's like you're singing it to me. Like I exist. He closed the letter carefully, placing it in his jacket pocket. Not the trash bin like most. That night, back at the hotel, he read it again. Then he pulled out the others. Dozens. All from Lucy. Each with a date, a quote, and sometimes a drawing. One showed her in a wheelchair at the hospital's garden, holding a daisy. Another was just lyrics, rewritten in her handwriting with hearts and music notes. They weren't fan letters. They were love letters, not romantic, but spiritual. Love for life, love for sound, love for the parts of herself that only music kept alive. 6 months ago, Freddie was in Munich, working on vocals. He couldn't concentrate. "Again," he told the sound engineer. "Rewind." He kept fumbling the second verse of "Who Wants to Live Forever." His voice cracked on "When Love Must Die." "Take a break," Brian May suggested gently. Freddie walked outside, into the biting air. He lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. Then, reaching into his coat, he pulled out a letter, the latest one. "Dear Freddie, they say the cancer's back. This time in my lungs. I don't know if I'll see the summer. But I wanted you to know I still dance to Don't Stop Me Now every morning. Well, sort of. I can't stand long, but I wiggle in my chair and scare the nurses. It makes them laugh. Thank you for that. He wiped his eye. P.S. If miracles exist, I'd love to see Queen live. Just once. Even from the very back row. I'd bring my notebook. I'd write it all down. That was the day Freddie decided. He wasn't going to wait for a miracle. Back in room 9, Lucy stirred. Freddie leaned closer, unsure if he should call out. But then her eyes fluttered open. For a second, she stared blankly. Then her lips parted. "Freddie?" He smiled. Gently. "Hello, darling." She blinked, her eyes adjusting. Her hands gripped the bedsheets. Am I dreaming?" "No," he whispered. "But if you are, don't wake up yet." She began to cry, soft, shaking sobs. Freddie sat beside her, taking her hand. "Lucy Walker," he said, "you are a very hard girl to find. Do you know that?" I didn't think you read them," she stammered. He reached into his coat and pulled out a bundle. Her letters, wore at the edges, some stained from years of being carried. Every single one. Her face crumpled. "You came all this way." "I flew 500 miles because you wrote the most beautiful songs I've ever read," he said. "You just didn't realize they were songs." She smiled through tears. "I didn't think I had time left." "Then let's not waste a second of it." He pulled out the cassette tape from his pocket. "Wrote you something," he said. "Well, kind of rewrote something. Just for you." He handed the tape to the nurse. "Play this." As the soft acoustic intro to Love of My Life filled the room, slowed down, raw, intimate, Freddie watched Lucy close her eyes, her lips quivering with every note. "Is that your voice?" "Yes," he said. "But this time it's not for Wembley. It's just for you." The soft melody from the cassette player washed over the room like a lullaby. Freddie's voice, stripped of stadium reverb, raw and vulnerable, wrapped around every corner of room 9. It wasn't the showman's voice. This was the man behind the legend, and he was singing for her. Lucy's fingers, pale and thin, curled gently into the sheets as she listened. Her eyes shimmered in the low light, reflecting the faint glow of the fairy lights above. Freddie stayed seated at her side, still holding her hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred. The song ended. Lucy turned her head toward him and whispered, "That's my favorite version now." He smiled, eyes crinkling. "Good, because no one else is getting a copy." Her laugh came out in a wheeze, and she winced. "Careful," he said, concerned. "Am I too exciting to be around?" She shook her head slowly. "I just can't believe you're here. I don't know. I thought I'd just be a face in the crowd. If I ever made it." Freddie leaned in. "Lucy, you were never just a face in the crowd." He glanced around the room. The books, the keyboard in the corner, the notebook stacked beside her bed, all filled with scribbles and lyrics and drawings of lightning bolts and cats wearing crowns. "You've got more soul in this tiny room than some entire concert halls I played," he said. Her face flushed pink. "You mean that?" "I flew 500 miles in the dead of night, didn't I?" He winked. "Trust me, I don't get out of bed for just anyone." She giggled, then coughed. The nurse stepped in gently, adjusting her oxygen. Lucy gave her a weak thumbs up. Freddie stood, offering the nurse a nod of thanks before turning back to the small table beside the bed. He picked up a notebook and flipped through it, pages upon pages of lyrics, some hopeful, some heartbreaking. One page caught his eye, written in blue ink, with tears smudging the corner. Somewhere between the silence and the song, "I still hear you." He looked at Lucy. "You wrote this?" She nodded. "Wrote it after they told me it came back." Freddie sat back down beside her, notebook still in hand. "That line," he said softly, "that's better than anything I've written in weeks." She rolled her eyes. "Don't patronize me." "I'm not. I mean it," he said. "You hear music the way I used to when I was your age. Before the business. Before the pressure. Just pure." She looked at him seriously. "Why'd you come? Really?" He hesitated. "Because," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "I wanted to meet the girl who reminded me why I do this. That silencer. I've sung for thousands, Lucy. I've had stadiums scream my name. But you, he reached over and tapped her notebook. You listen differently. You don't just hear the music, you feel it, and that's rare. A tear slipped down her cheek. I was scared you'd never read my letters, she said, that I was shouting into the void. You weren't. He reached into his coat again and pulled out another item, a small velvet box. Her eyes widened. Is that? Freddie opened it. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, a simple charm at the center shaped like a crown. The same stylized crown from the Queen logo, only smaller. Hand-carved, one of only 3 in the world. I had this made in Japan in '81, he said. Kept it all these years. Never wore it. Never gave it away. He reached forward and gently placed it around her neck. It belongs with royalty, he said. And you, my dear, are a queen. Her hands trembled as she touched the charm. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he whispered. The door opened again. Lucy's mother peeked in, eyes red from crying. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't want to interrupt, but I had to see it with my own eyes. Freddie stood and walked over to her. You raise an extraordinary young woman, he said. I just wanted to tell her in person. Her mother hugged him, a soft, motherly hug. She didn't speak, just held him for a moment that said more than words could. That evening, Freddie spent 3 hours in room 9. He read Lucy's lyrics aloud, helped her finish a song she'd been stuck on for weeks, played a few chords on the tiny keyboard, laughing when it made a wonky beat instead of a C note. He didn't treat her like she was dying. He treated her like she was brilliant. At one point, she asked him, "Do you ever get scared?" "All the time," he answered. "But you never show it." "That's the job," he smiled. "The mustache helps." She laughed again, then whispered, "Sometimes I'm scared I'll just disappear, that no one will remember I was ever here." Freddie leaned in and placed a hand over hers. "You've already made your mark, Lucy. On me." He glanced at the notebook again. "And when I sing your words, because I will, you'll be there, every night, every show." Her eyes filled again. "Promise. Cross my heart." Before he left, he whispered something to the nurse at the door, slipped her a folded piece of paper. "Play this tomorrow," he said. "No matter what." Then he turned back to Lucy one last time. "I'll see you soon, love." She nodded. "Even if I'm not here?" He smiled sadly. "Especially then." He kissed her forehead, took one last look around the glowing, love-filled room, and walked out. The next morning, room 9 awoke to the sound of a new voice. Not from the radio. From the hallway. A nurse wheeled in a small TV. A VHS was already loaded, and there on the screen was Freddie Mercury, sitting at a grand piano in a quiet studio. Alone. No crowd. He looked into the camera and said, "This is for Lucy, and for anyone who ever thought their voice didn't matter." He began to play. Somewhere between the silence and the song, "I Still Hear You." The crowd at Wembley Arena that night was feral with anticipation. Every seat was packed. 40,000 fans screamed and stomped, their chants rising into a frenzy beneath a haze of stage smoke and blinding spotlights. It was Queen's biggest show in months, the kind that sells out in hours, where scalpers made fortunes and fans camped outside just for a glimpse of Freddie Mercury in full command. But backstage, something was different. Freddie sat alone in the green room, head bowed over a page of music. No makeup, no costume yet, just a cup of tea gone cold beside him, and a sheet of handwritten lyrics in his lap. Not one of Queen's songs. Not yet. It was Lucy's. The same line she'd scribbled in that tear-stained notebook beside her hospice bed. He had memorized it now, repeated it like a mantra in the days since his visit. Somewhere between the silence and the song, "I Still Hear You." He didn't know if she was still alive. No one had called. No one had written. And he hadn't asked, because if he said the words out loud, if he asked a question, then it would become real. Instead, he did what he knew how to do best. He turned pain into performance. Brian may enter quietly, guitar slung across his back. He paused when he saw Freddie, still, focused, almost reverent. "You all right?" Freddie looked up, forcing a grin. Never better. Brian wasn't convinced, but he nodded. Set list ready. They want to know if we're keeping Radio GAJ before we are the champions. Freddie stood, folding the sheet of paper slowly. We're changing it. Brian blinked. What? Freddie stepped forward, voice low. We're adding something. Just me. Acoustic. A pause. Brian studied him. This about her? Freddie didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, I promised someone I'd sing from the heart tonight. Just one song. No lights. No theatrics. Another pause. Then Brian nodded. All right, we'll make it happen. The lights dimmed. The crowd roared. Drums thundered. Guitars shrieked. Freddie emerged like a force of nature, all charisma and fire, strutting across the stage in a sleeveless Union Jack shirt, wielding the microphone stand like a sword. They tore through Hammer to Fall, Killer Queen, Under Pressure. By the end of the third song, the crowd was a living beast, moving as one, worshiping him. But then it changed. Just past the 45-minute mark, after the final crash of Don't Stop Me Now, the lights cut abruptly. The stage went dark. The crowd fell into an uneasy murmur. Then a single spotlight snapped on, illuminating a black grand piano at center stage. Freddie walked to it alone. No band. No backup. The silence was deafening. He sat, adjusted the mic, then leaned in and spoke into the stillness. There's no encore big enough for what I'm about to say, he said softly. A hush fell over the stadium. This tour was supposed to be just another show, just another run through the hits. But a few days ago, I was reminded why I started singing in the first place. The crowd watched, puzzled but riveted. Freddie continued, his voice steady, almost gentle. I met someone recently, someone who'll never stand on this stage, who'll never hear the roar of a crowd. But she taught me something I'd forgotten. He paused, swallowing. She reminded me that music isn't about charts or records. It's about reaching someone, just one person, in the darkest hour of their life. Somewhere in the audience, someone gasped. Another whispered, Is he okay? Freddie smiled, just barely. This one's not in our usual set list. But tonight, I'm not singing for all of you. I'm singing for her. He lowered his hands to the keys and began to play. It started slow, haunting, a simple minor key melody. Then the lyrics, somewhere between the silence and the song. I still hear you, still feel strong. You were the verse I never knew I wrote, the harmony I never dared to quote. The audience froze. This wasn't Queen. This was Freddie Mercury, unmasked. No theatrics, no makeup, just a man at a piano, pouring his heart into a melody no one had heard before. A few fans began to cry. Others swayed silently. By the second verse, Freddie's voice began to tremble, not from weakness, but from weight. You held on when the world let go. With every chord, your heartbeat showed. Now you're the echo in my song, and I will carry you from now on. He looked upward as he sang that last line, not to the rafters, but to something higher. And for a second, something happened. The entire arena, 40,000 fans, went still. No phones, no cheers, just a soft rise and fall of breath as they listened to this gift they didn't expect. When the song ended, Freddie simply bowed his head and whispered, Thank you, Lucy. He didn't explain, didn't elaborate. He stood, walked off stage. The crowd erupted, not in wild screams, but in applause that felt like prayer. Backstage, Brian waited. Who was she? He asked. Freddie only smiled, tears in his eyes. Someone who saved me, he whispered, without ever knowing it. That night, fans flooded message boards trying to figure out what the song was, where it came from, why Freddie had sung it with such emotion. Some speculated it was a tribute to a lost lover. Others thought it was for a sibling, a parent, maybe even himself. None of them guessed the truth, because Freddie never told the press, never put the song on an album, never performed it again. It belonged to one person. And though her name was never spoken aloud, the entire world had heard her voice. ACTV, the last letter, 1000 words. It came in a simple white envelope with no return address, just Freddie's name written in looping blue ink. He found it on his dressing room table 2 weeks after the Wembley performance, quietly slipped between a bouquet of roses and a crumpled note from a music journalist. For a moment, he didn't recognize the handwriting. Then his fingers trembled. Lucy. He sat down slowly. The room around him faded. The makeup mirror, the champagne bottle, the bustle of crew members shouting beyond the door. All of it disappeared. The only sound was the soft rustle of paper as he unfolded the final page she would ever write. Dear Freddie, if you're reading this, I've probably gone. I know. Dramatic opener. Forgive me. I've always been a sucker for a grand entrance. Or exit. First of all, thank you for coming, for singing to me, for holding my hand and letting me hear your voice up close. That day, that hour, made my whole life feel complete. You made me feel real, Freddie. Not just like a girl on borrowed time, but like someone worth singing to. I didn't tell you everything. I wanted to, but I didn't know how. I was scared, not of dying, but of being forgotten, of becoming just another chart on a hospital clipboard. But you made sure that wouldn't happen. I watched your show at Wembley on an old TV in the hospice lounge. Mom wheeled me in. Everyone cried. Even the nurse who always pretended to be tough. I heard you say my name. Just once. Softly. But I heard it. I don't think I stopped crying for an hour. And Freddie, that song? It was mine. Ours. And somehow the world heard it. You didn't just sing to me. You made me timeless. So thank you from wherever I am now. If there's an afterlife, I hope they have pianos. I hope you play mine one day. And if you ever wonder whether your music saved a life, it did. All my love, Lucy Walker, the girl in room 9. Freddie didn't move. His tea had gone cold again. He stared at the paper until the words blurred, until they were no longer letters but feelings, raw and jagged and endless. Then, without warning, he stood and disappeared into the hallway. 3 days later, the staff at St. Clair Hospice received a call. Freddie Mercury had arranged, anonymously, to cover the full cost of Lucy's medical care, as well as a full renovation of the children's wing. No interviews, no credit, just quiet instructions and a transfer of funds. But he left something else behind. 2. A name for the newly built music room. Lucy's Song. Inside it, children now played on donated keyboards and ukuleles, sat on beanbags embroidered with Queen lyrics, and painted murals of stars, hearts, and Freddie's signature lightning bolts. Above the doorway was a plaque that read, "In memory of Lucy Walker," whose lyrics taught us that somewhere between the silence and the song, love endures. 6 months later, backstage at Queen's final tour before the world would learn of Freddie's diagnosis, a journalist cornered him in the wings. "Freddie," he said, breathless. "Quick question. Fans have been wondering for months. Who was that acoustic ballad for at Wembley?" Freddie turned, playful but tired. "Darling," he said, slipping on his sunglasses, "some songs don't belong on the radio." Then he walked on stage to thunder. Years passed. Lucy's name was never printed in a magazine, never featured on an album sleeve. But among Freddie's inner circle, she was remembered like a ghost, not haunting, but illuminating. Brian May once said in an interview, "There was this girl, a fan, not famous, but I think she gave Freddie one of the last pure moments of joy he ever had." After Freddie's death in 1991, the estate quietly honored one request from his personal will, a donation made annually to a children's hospice in the Scottish Highlands. No one outside a small circle ever knew why. 15 years later, a young girl named Emily stood in the music room at St. Clair. She was 12, thin from chemo, scared, lonely. Her nurse handed her a notebook, one that had belonged to a girl named Lucy. Inside were lyrics, drawings, and a photograph of a Queen concert. Tucked inside the last page was a silver necklace shaped like a crown. No explanation, just a note. If music ever makes you feel less afraid, keep listening and keep writing. Emily looked at the photo of Freddie at the piano and whispered, "Who was she?" The nurse smiled, someone Freddie Mercury flew 500 miles to sing to. Emily didn't know who Freddie was, but she would, and so would others, because every time someone stepped into that room and picked up a tambourine or strummed a note, they stepped into Lucy's song, the one that traveled from a hospice bed in room 9 to Wembley Arena and beyond. And Freddie? He never sang the ballad again, but those who were there that night say there was something in his voice afterward, something softer, like the echo of a note only one person had heard, but that lingered still, a song that began as a whisper, but would never be forgotten. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.